Hey everybody, how are you? I hope you are staying warm. I've mentioned in my Facebook post earlier today that you should stay home and get on your couch or wherever and get your snuggies and your blankets out. If you took that literally and you actually have a snuggie, go ahead and take a picture of yourself and put it in the comments. I was going to wear mine over here to the office, but Lauren says it's not allowed to leave the house. So here I am, unfortunately. I wanted to lead by example, but the boss told me no. So a couple announcements for you since we're not going to be here. You guys aren't here in the building tonight. A couple things. First, the youth group Valentine's Day dinner fundraiser is coming up February 10th at 5:30 p.m. It's a Sunday night, and we decided to put it on a Sunday night because lots of other stuff was happening. And also, it gives us a chance. You guys don't have to miss another night out of the week since we have church on Sunday nights again anyway, or at least we've had one. I hope to have some more. A few other things. This weekend, this Sunday evening at 5 o'clock, not 5:30, 5 o'clock. We're doing a little different. So make sure this Sunday, February 3rd, 5 p.m., is a question and answer session with me about as I candidate to be our senior pastor. And then you guys will ask questions, and I'll have some copies of my resume floating around. And then once you're done with all your questions, I will head out, and then you guys will vote, and then we'll put it all in God's hands from there. But also on Sunday night is Frida is hosting the youth group party. I'm not allowed to say the actual name of the game because of legal issues, and since I'm posting this as a live video, I'm not allowed to say it. But you know what's going on. There's a big football game, and so Frida has hosted the party for that game for years, and we are excited to continue the tradition and have a good time. So students and families of students who are coming, just bring some kind of snacks, chips, or whatever, and bring a 2 liter or gallon jug of your favorite beverage to share. I'll be grabbing some pizzas, and I will meet you guys over there. I'll probably head over straight from the church. And so I know that there's a lot happening on one day, but kickoff is at 6:30. That's when the party starts. Hopefully there's not too much discussion that keeps you guys from that. And nobody really, the game never really starts on time anyway. So the party starts at Frida's is at 6:30. That's mostly for youth group, but if you're young at heart, I'm sure you could sneak in at Frida's house. So that would be a lot of fun. The other announcements, let me check my notes here. Nope, I think that's it. So our Valentine's Day dinner. Oh, and the sign-up sheet for the Valentine's Day dinner is on the information center here at the church. So on Sunday morning, you can sign up there. Let us know. Childcare is provided, and it'll tell you we're having lasagna and garlic bread. I think we'll have cheesecake as well. A similar menu to last year, salad too. So keep that in mind and sign up. If you have any questions about that, ask me or Lauren, and we will answer them as best we can. So there you go. That being said, tonight is Wednesday, and as you know, Wednesdays is where I get to teach youth group. And when we discussed the weather and canceling, you guys have the youth group message. So this actually, believe it or not, this is one of the better ones to do for the entire congregation because it deals with something that we all have to deal with, is authority. We all struggle with authority. Even if you're your own boss, there's always somebody who's an authority over you. You never really grow into a place where you are in charge of all things because there's always God. And so, but this is the first week of a 2-week series called Says Who. And so we're going to talk a little bit about authority tonight. And then next Wednesday, we'll dive into how to respect authority that's not always good authority. And that's an excellent question to ask, but that discussion is next week. So with that being said, I'm going to pray, and we'll get into it. And we'll just see what the Bible has to say about authority figures in our lives. So would you pray with me? God, thank you so much for today and for technology and the opportunity to still have church from the comfort and warmth and safety of our own homes. God, we certainly miss being together this evening, but we also recognize the safety and that comes with being able to stay home and when the weather gets like this and gets so cold. God, we pray for those who don't have a warm place tonight. We pray that they would find shelter, they would find food, that they would find the things that they need to stay protected from this cold. So, God, we ask your blessings on them, and it's in Jesus' name we pray. Amen. So the bottom line, if you take notes, I hope you do when we do these online things. Sometimes it's harder to pay attention. I know I have a distracting poster behind me on that side, among other things. So if you find it, sometimes it's easier to pay attention in the sanctuary. So I hope you take notes when we do these online things. But the bottom line for tonight, the thing that I would love for you to write down if you take notes, is that honoring authority now brings more freedom later. All right? Honoring authority now brings more freedom later. So, and that's we're gonna circle back around to that in just a minute. So, I have a question, and I hope it's not just me. But do you have a hard time being told what to do by somebody? I certainly do. And I think the reality of us, the reality is all of us at some point or another struggle or have struggled with being bossed around. We don't always want to follow along. I'm going to be using these a lot, by the way. Make sure we see them. Follow along. All right. And we don't always want to do that. We don't always want to follow along. When authority tells us what to do. When that happens, instead of doing what someone else asks of us, we'd rather just kind of throw up your hands and just say, oh yeah, says who? Because we think that if we could be the ones in charge, if we could lead the way, our lives would be much, much better if we were the bosses. And I remember, I'm going to tell on myself a little bit, but I remember looking at some of my teachers in school, different grades, it didn't matter what year or whatever, but I remember looking at a few of my different teachers and just thinking to myself, like, you are so clueless. How do you get to tell me what to do when you're so dumb? And I've since, repented of that and apologized to some of them in person. And I don't know if any of you have experienced that yourself, but like I do. I remember thinking to myself, like, who put you in charge? And I remember having arguments with my parents too. It wasn't just my teachers, but and they'll tell you if my mom is watching, she'll comment and tell you about all the arguments that I've had with them. But as I remember thinking that their rules were just the dumbest things in the world when I was a teenager. I just did. I got to a certain point and I was like, why do you have this rule? This is dumb. And so specifically, my parents have a rule, and I don't know if they still do this or not, or just now that I'm adult, like I don't, they just don't yell at me for it. I'm not sure, but they have a rule that you can only have food at the table, like the dining room table. You could only eat food there. Like the table was for food. Table was there for eating. And so the thing was, though, the TV was in the living room. And they weren't the same room, and you couldn't always see the TV from the kitchen table, especially not my seat. We kind of had assigned seats when I was growing up too. But so, sometimes when I got home from work in high school, or if I got home from a track meet that was late, I wanted to eat and watch TV before I went to bed. And eventually, I got a TV in my bedroom, and we got cable hooked up to it or whatever. And so, like, I would try to eat in there too. It's like, look, it's my room. I'm not turning on the TV in the living room. I can be quiet. It's late. I'll eat my dinner and then go to bed, whatever. But every time, like whether they saw me doing it or not, they knew, because parents just know everything. I'm working on getting that skill as my kids get older, but they just knew, and they would get on my case every time. They're like, you can't eat in any room but the dining room. You have to eat food at the table. There was only like 2 exceptions. Like you could have apples. Like I could eat an apple in the living room, in the couch, and popcorn. We would do family movies, and we could eat popcorn in the living room. But like those were the only exceptions. Every other food product had to be eaten at the table. And so I remember getting so mad, like when my parents would yell at me about this. It just like drove me up a wall, man. I remember just arguing and yelling. I remember just yelling at my dad, like why do you even have this rule? It's so stupid. Like what's your problem? Why can't I just eat in my room? And if you have teenagers, you know that's how most of those discussions go anyway. Um, but my dad was just like, look, we eat at the table so you don't make a mess and we don't get ants in the living room, which in Florida is a very real problem. You get ants everywhere all year round. If there's a crumb of anything, ants find it, they're in your house, they're there forever. You might as well just move because ants have taken over. But even to this day, I'm kind of like, Dad, that's kind of weak. Like you could have come up with a better reason. I think the reason was because I said so. But eventually I got old enough and he just had to give me a reason. That's what he came up with. But I remember those arguments, and it wasn't just one time. We would fight and argue about that stuff all the time, those kind of things. And so chances are you felt this way at least once in your life too. And if we're being honest, I think we'd all probably say we still feel that way about some of the people in charge in our lives. Think about it. You know, maybe you feel like you know better than your teachers at school. Maybe you feel like you know better than your boss at work. Maybe you feel like you shouldn't be bossed around so much by your coaches. Maybe it's your parents. You don't understand why they're so strict. Maybe it's me or other pastors in your life. You feel like maybe like we're just always telling you what to do and how to live your life. Instead of having to listen to them, you feel like maybe you should be the one calling the shots and leading the way. Leading the way. Right? Like maybe that's you, right? Now, I know you've been told your whole life, especially in church, that you need to honor authority. And obeying and respecting those who are in authority are big parts of what that means to honor someone. But it can also mean that we follow their lead because we trust that they know what's best for us, that these people in charge of us know what's best. And it means that we seek out their advice and we go to them for direction when we aren't sure what to do in our lives. And so the problem isn't that we don't know what to do with authority, because we absolutely do. We know what its purpose is and we get it. The problem is that actually doing it, right? Actually honoring and respecting the authority figures in our lives is really hard to do. When we're stuck, in this in between, following what authority tells us to do, this one, and leading the way, this one, we're kind of in the middle. And we feel a lot of tension, a lot of pressure. Like, I should be making the decisions, but I also have to follow you. And that's a totally normal thing. And so the question is like, why is that normal? Why do you think that is? I think the one reason honoring authority might be hard, and this is for the youth group kids, is because you're teenagers. Or, for you adults, maybe you're teenagers at heart or teenagers right here, right? It's because you're teenagers and you're not kids anymore, but you're not quite adults yet either. You're certainly not a little kid, but you're not a full-fledged adult. And in this phase of your life, you don't want to be treated like a little kid. You don't want to be treated like a child. You want to make a lot of your own decisions, but it feels like the adults in your life aren't ready to give you all that freedom just yet. And so you're stuck in this weird in between, that's where you are. Now, if you're an adult and you feel this tension, it could be for a lot of reasons, but the reality is this happens in work, right? You've been working there for 5, 10, 15 years of this company, your job, you got it figured out, then a new boss shows up, right? And they change things around, and you're like, look, I know what I'm doing. I should just be in charge of this project, or I should be in charge of this section, or these people, or this office. But you're not. Like, even though you feel like you should be, for whatever reason, that's not your job, that's not your role. And there's still a lot of tension there. You're not a teenager anymore. But the reality of life is that you're still kind of in between. There are some things where you can lead the way, and there are some things where you still have to follow along. And that's life. And another reason this can be hard is because maybe you feel like some of your authority figures don't deserve your respect, right? You know you should honor and respect them. You don't feel like they've earned it. And let's face it, not all adults always act like someone who should be in charge. You know, as an adult, I see that, I recognize that. When I was a teenager, I certainly thought that more often than I do now, right? But that makes respecting their authority even more difficult to do. And again, next week we're going to dive into how to deal with those situations specifically. Um, for some of us, it's that we really think we know better than the authority figures in our lives. After all, no one knows what it's like to be you better than you do. So why should anyone else get to tell you anything about your life? Like, they're not you. You know, why do they get to make all the decisions that impact you? And that's a legitimate thought process. I mean, some of you, honestly, maybe you just don't care about authority. You care way more about what your friends think than what anybody who's supposedly in charge of you thinks. But the point is, we all have reasons that make honoring authority difficult. And if you really think about it, all of these scenarios come down to one simple truth. It's that we feel like the authorities in our lives are trying to take away our freedom. And that lack of freedom leads to frustration. So I have some good news and some bad news for you. The bad news is that no matter how much we don't like authority, one thing in life is certain: we're all going to have some sort of authority for the rest of our lives, like some sort of authority figure for the rest of our lives. The tension we feel isn't going to go away. Some of the adults watching right now, you can go ahead and comment and tell our students, hey, look, I'm X years old and I still have this tension between leading and following. Or you can maybe leave your age out and just say that's the reality of life, right? The tension doesn't go away. We're all always going to be stuck between leading the way in our lives and following authority. It's just the reality. But the good news is that authority doesn't have to be a bad thing in your life. Honoring and respecting authority doesn't have to mean your freedom is limited. In fact, it can actually mean that a whole lot more freedom is coming your way. And there's a passage in the New Testament that has something to say about this whole concept of authority. It's found in Hebrews, a book in the Bible written to early Christian believers that were Jewish believers, and they've converted. And so there's a lot of cool stuff in there. But right in the middle of this letter, the writer stopped to say something to these Christians about how to handle the authority figures in their world. And here's what the passage says. It's Hebrews chapter 13, verse 17. It says this. It says, have confidence in your leaders and submit to their authority, because they keep watch over you as those who must give an account. Do this so that their work will be a joy, not a burden, for that would be of no benefit to you. That's Hebrews 13, chapter 13, verse 17. So let's break this down a little bit. The first thing this passage asked the early Christians to do was to have confidence in their leaders. It starts there because they didn't always have confidence or faith in the people in charge of them. They didn't think their leaders really knew or wanted what was best for them. And if you look at their culture, that makes sense. I mean, who was in charge at the time? The Romans. Did the Romans respect the Jewish people or the Christians? Absolutely not. And so, but that's the reality, right? Their leaders, maybe they didn't know or even want to do what was best for them. So they wanted to just respond to their leaders, their authority figures, the same way we do. We just, says who, do this, says who, you're not the boss of me. They kind of had that same tension that we have. They probably felt like they wanted to lead their own way. But the writer told them that in spite of all that, these early believers needed to have confidence in their leaders. And this is really specifically talking about the leaders in the church, but also, as time went on, their governors and mayors and all of their political leaders as well. But then the writer of Hebrews takes it one step further. right? The letter asks these Christians to not only have confidence in their leaders, but to submit to their authority, to follow along with their leading. Do you know what that means for us? Well, it means that we should respect the leading of authority in our lives, that we should follow along, to give up what we may want to do in favor of what authority is asking us to do. And this is where it gets really difficult. It's one thing to have confidence in or respect for a leader. There are lots of leaders and lots of positions that I respect, but it's a whole other thing to actually submit to them and do what they say with a good attitude. I mean, anybody else out there struggle with that? Just give us a thumbs up, right? You do. The writer of Hebrews told these early Christians that they should submit to their authority so that the authority figures, their work would be a joy, not a burden. In other words, think about the way you treat your authority figures in your life and consider how it makes them feel, right? Like, that's mind-blowing, right? Are you making life easier on them or harder? Do you make it joyful or miserable to lead you? Are you making it impossible or possible for them to do their jobs? How are you making your authority figures feel? That's not really something many of us think about when it comes to authority, when it comes to the people in charge, right? And that's why I love that the Bible brings it up. The Bible is always concerned with our relationships with all those people around us. And as Christians, we need to set the tone for those relationships and make them as good as we possibly can. And even the relationships we have with those in authority over us, right? How do we make them feel? You know, we usually think only about the way authority figures' rules and regulations make us feel, right? Your rules are stupid. You're too strict. You're ruining my life. Changing this process is going to make my job 10 times harder, right? We only think about how it affects us. We think about how authority makes us feel, right? I mean, that's true. And so, like, we never stop to consider that maybe the way we're responding to their authority makes them feel pretty terrible. I don't know about you, but I'd rather have people say that I'm a joy to lead than a burden, right? I want people to say that, I'm easy to lead and that I come alongside you rather than they have to drag me to where we're going. I want to be easy to lead. I don't want to be difficult. Because as the writer of Hebrews reminded us here, being a burden doesn't actually benefit us. It doesn't. You can kick and scream and fight all you want. It's not beneficial to anybody. You make their life harder, you make your life harder, and you set a bad example of what a Christ follower should look like. And so it doesn't even get us the freedom that we desperately want. When we reject and disrespect authority, they just end up tightening their grip around our lives, right? Have you experienced that? Have you seen that? Here's an example, all right? And this is an excellent example. Let's say you use your phone after 10 o'clock at night, after 10 p.m. But according to the family rule, all technology has to be off by 8. Because you rejected the rule, your phone gets taken away. And you're going to say, it's not fair, whatever, but the rules are rules, and you broke it. So your phone gets taken away. Your freedom to use your phone is now limited. That's how it is with all authority. Rejecting authority gets you grounded. It gets you an earlier curfew. It gets you demerits or punishments or working weekends at your job, right? That's what happens. It lands you in lunch detention, and it gets you more laps after practice. And eventually in life, there are some rules. If there's some authority figures, if you try to reject, you're going to end up with some bigger consequences. It's where police and speed limits and all of that kind of stuff comes into play, right? In other words, when we reject authority, we end up giving up the freedom that we were hoping to find in the first place. Right? It doesn't work the way we think it's going to. So here's what I want you to know. Honoring authority now brings more freedom later. And I know this doesn't always feel true, but it absolutely is. When we can apply the wisdom from Hebrews to our lives, when we give our leaders the respect and honor they deserve, when we make ourselves a joy to lead rather than a burden, we're laying the foundation for more freedom over time. Think about the most rebellious people you know, kids, adults, whoever. How much freedom do they really have? Right? You may think, oh, they can do whatever they want. They're living the dream. But and the reality of that is certainly not true. And if you take a closer look at their lives, you see this very clearly, right? Think about like students, right? The most rebellious kids you know. The more and more they disrespect and disobey the authority in their lives, the less and less freedom they have. They get grounded, they get detention, they get whatever. Sometimes those people grow up, if they don't change their ways, they go to jail, they get arrested, you know? Um, the most, but the opposite is also true, right? Think about the most respectful people you know, and sticking with kids because it's easier to see this, right? The most respectful kids you know, these kids get more and more opportunities to try new things, right? They get to go new places. They get to hang out with new friends. They get to have a later curfew. They get nicer stuff, right? Because their attitudes and actions have shown over time that they can handle it. They've earned that new freedom, and they know that this is true, that honoring authority now brings more freedom later. And so I know that it's hard for us, right, in school and in work sometimes to remember that or to understand and believe that simply following the rules of authority in our lives today can get us more freedom in the future. But as someone who's been where you are, and even as an adult, like I still have authority figures in my life, right? I can promise you that this is true. This is definitely the way that it works, right? So what can you do to ease this tension between wanting to lead the way and following along? Well, first, you need to identify the people in charge in your world. Your bosses, your managers, your teachers, your coaches, your parents, pastors, whoever, right? Now, of that list of the people in charge in your life, who do you have the most trouble listening to and respecting? So just think about it. Maybe you have 5 people in charge of you and you have a real issue with 1 or 2, right? Or maybe you have, I don't know, 20 people in charge of you and you have an issue with 10 of them, whatever the case may be. But think about those that you have the most trouble listening to, the most trouble respecting. And so focus on these people first. Focus on them first. Go ahead, think about it. Think about the hard people, get really mad because you don't like them, and then get over it. Those are the people we're going to focus on first. And then you need to do these 2 things, just two things. Number 1, say something. And this is what I mean. Don't go off on a rant. Don't tell them that they're stupid and that you could do better. Don't do that. What you need to do is change the way you speak to those people who have authority in your life. This is obviously easier said than done, and it takes practice, it takes time. But instead of mentally or actually out loud responding with a rude says who when they tell you to do something, right? Change your approach and your attitude. Change your tone. Change the words that you use to show a little more respect when you interact with them. Look, you can still disagree with them, with an authority figure. You can still have your disagreements, but it's all about the way you communicate it. Don't go off at the mouth disrespectfully. That will totally help you and help heal those relationships. And speaking in a respectful tone, they're going to respond positively back to that. And it may turn out that they're not jerks and they're not stupid. You just have a disagreement. But you have to say something. Change the way that you speak to them. And number 2, do something, right? Change the way you treat the authority figures in your life. Change the behavior you have towards them. Change your attitudes, change your actions. Try responding to their leading in a way that's different than you have in the past, right? If they've asked you to do something, here's a list. Instead of sulking when you get in trouble for not doing your homework, you just apologize to the teacher and say, look, I'm sorry, I didn't do it. I'll try harder next time, right? Maybe instead of arguing with your parent when they ask you to take out the trash, you just do it, and maybe even try to have a smile on. Just give it a shot. Try a smile. It'll creep them out. It'll be worth it, and for everybody will get a laugh, right? If you're an adult, right, your boss sends an email that is asking you to work weekends or whatever the case may be. Uh, Say something. Just say yes, sir, no, sir. Find a way to do that thing respectfully. If your boss hands you a stack of papers and says, I need you to make 100 copies of these, and that's not normally your deal, you're not the copy person, just do it. Just do it with a smile and say, sure. And you can be upset about it, but make sure you do it, and make sure the way that you act shows respect to those people in authority in your life, right? Little changes in how you treat authority can go a long, long way. Now, remember, it may not be easy all the time, but it's going to make your life better in the long run. Because honoring authority now brings more freedom later. And so, again, I mentioned this a couple times, but next week we'll dive into ways we can navigate situations when following and honoring authority seems really, really difficult. But for today, I like to close with this, all right? And keep this in mind, this is important. Most authority figures have good intentions of leading us in positive, healthy ways. But some of you out there watching right now, you may be in situations where they are truly mistreating you. And it's sad to say, but the reality of this world, based on the amount of people watching this, percentage-wise, there's somebody listening who's being mistreated and abused by an authority figure. They're using the power they have in your life to abuse you or to harm you. And I want you to know that's not the kind of authority that you need to submit to or respect. It's not good. It's bad. And just because they're an authority over you doesn't mean they're allowed to hurt you or take advantage of you. So if someone in authority is mistreating you, and I don't mean they ground you and take your phone away, right? Like, you know what I'm talking about, like serious mistreatment, okay? If someone is mistreating or abusing you, you need to go to another trusted authority in your life, okay? A teacher, a parent, a coach. You can give me a call or text or whatever, right? Find a trusted authority figure who can help you take the right steps to get out of that situation, right? If you need to have that conversation, I encourage you to not wait. Have that now with whoever that trusted adult is in your life. The longer you wait, the harder it's going to be, all right? So have that conversation with somebody when it's safe to speak up. Now, I hope that you guys can come back and we get to have church next week. Students, we can talk about respecting authority that's hard to respect, honoring authority that's hard to respect. We'll talk about that. Adults, Beth is going to have something awesome for you. I'm not sure what it is, but I know it's amazing. She could teach the alphabet, and it would be awesome because she is awesome. But that's next week. So I encourage you to come back if we get to do church. If not, tune in and we'll talk about that together. But that's what we're talking about next week. So again, it's part 2 of this series. But as we head out, as we close, I want you to think about this question. This question in your life, what is it? All right. What authority figures in my life do I struggle to respect? What authority figures in my life do I struggle to respect? And picture them, names, faces. You probably already have some in your head coming up. All right. Which ones do I struggle to respect? And then maybe go a little bit further and then say, what do I need to change to show them respect? How do I need to talk to them differently? How do I need to act toward them differently? Think about those questions. Maybe discuss them if somebody's at the house with you and you're watching this together. Maybe have some discussions about that. Parents, if you're watching this with your kids, you know what? Tell them about a time where you struggled to deal with authority. Maybe you had an issue with your parents, the same issue that your kids have with you. Talk it over, or grandparents or whoever's watching. Maybe maybe share and have some conversation about that. I think that would be fun to hear about. Let me know how it goes when I see you guys on Sunday morning. Looking forward to seeing you then. Have a good night. Bye.